Wow, that's pretty cool. Hey, how you all doing? I hope you've been doing great, and I sure hope you've been enjoying our Roads and Roads podcast, the Jorma and John podcast. We're in a real change of venue today. We usually are always in the Reverend Gary Davis living room when you see our program, but today we have a special edition coming to you from Stewart's Opera House. This beautiful historic place here in Nelsonville, Ohio, on the square, in Athens County still. But we have a show tonight with Hot Tuna, tonight and tomorrow night, and we'll be interviewing Jorma and Jack right here from on stage, taking some questions from the audience. So glad you tuned in for this special edition, Roads and Roads. Thanks for tuning in.
Road set my soul on fire. Thinking back before I left, the passions I desire. Won't you help me?
Well, hey, nice to see you. We are here with Jack Casady, who we've been waiting to get to Ohio so we could put him on the podcast with us. We are backstage here in Nelsonville at the Stewart's Opera House, where Hot Tuna will be doing a show tonight and had a great show last night.
Well, thank
Respect, you. Jack. Getting better every day.
Thank you, Bub.
Better and better. But anyhow, Jack, we were so happy that you take the time to come and be on the program.
I love this. I've watched the program. I have watched the program. As a matter of fact, I was in the Costco line, about 20 cars waiting for some gasoline, and I caught a good section of the program there. Put it up on my steering wheel, ran it through the system in my Wagoneer, my Macintosh system in a Wagoneer, and I heard everything.
Oh, I love to hear this. I love to hear this. Well, Jack, I just want to go past a few things we've talked about in previous podcasts because when we do, a lot of times Jorma will say it'd be interesting to get Jack's comment about that. So today we get
that means he forgot and he thinks I'm going to remember.
Well, in some cases that's true. He does say you're gifted with a great memory, so that is a nice thing. But anyhow, so Jack, in the first two podcasts we were talking about Jefferson Airplane records, and the first one was in regard to the second last Jefferson Airplane studio record, Bark, and the second program was about the second Jefferson Airplane record, the great Surrealistic Pillow.
Right.
So I wanted to start with Bark and see what any general comments, overview of the record in your opinion.
Well, Bark was getting towards the end of the life of Jefferson Airplane. So, once a band gets up to speed and they're out on the road all the time, they've got a lot of projects going on, and then a record company expects a yearly record from the band, and then things start to get a bit disjointed. But that being said, I think it was a really good record for Jefferson Airplane, although it was headed towards the end of the life of Jefferson Airplane. So our chops were really up and capable, and we're craft work. We're working on the songs, but we all had a lot of different directions going on. Jorma and I had already started Hot Tuna as an entity and as a project to devote a lot of our time to, and the other guys in the band, Paul was starting to do solo projects. I think Grace had done one. So things were, in general, things at a time of the history of the band were a lot more diffused. But that being said, we went into the studio and I thought it made a really good album.
I do too, Jack, and I tell you, it's a sleeper of a record in some ways because I've loved it since it came out, and like the Rock and Roll Island and War movie, I just think are some of the great songs on the record, and I got to say your bass playing is just fantastic on there as well, and I love the reissues where they brought that bass into the mix where you can hear your parts a lot better, which is just great. Jorma commented about that, Jack. He said the fact that he was a songwriter on so many of the songs on there was a sign that, where he had only gotten one or two songs out.
Well, I think that,
because
but that's always been the case in that sense, and that's what, when you have a band with a lot of songwriters. Those are the days, you had five 5 songs to a side of a record, maybe 6 if you squashed all those grooves together. And that was an issue. When you talked about sonically the issue, people talked about vinyl all the time. But the reality was, we thought the best sound was when we bought our Revox reel-to-reel tape, like Frank Sinatra did and Elvis did, and all if you wanted total sonic saturation like you heard in the studio, the vinyl couldn't keep up because they had to compress those grooves a bit, and that's the bass end. So I remember when Dynagroove came in, that was an RCA thing. The whole idea was that basically it was like a physical compression that wouldn't allow a really wide groove, because they would say that the low bass notes of Jack would make the needles jump off the record, So sonically, we brought home the reel-to-reel 17 IPS tapes, and that's how we listened to a lot of music. But I was doing some Facebook stuff, and I follow a couple of a lot of the old jazz channels, and there's one which showed Frank Sinatra in his house in the mid '60s. When we started recording, and they had his reel-to-reel up on the wall there, and that's how a lot of guys listened to it if they wanted that really hi-fi sound.
Yeah, the reel-to-reel is like an ultimate kind of hi-fi thing. Okay, well, talking about Bark there, let's talk about Surrealistic Pillow, because what an accomplishment that is, recognized, as one of the greatest records of all time, the Smithsonian, all that kind of thing there. And a couple things we talked about, Jack, was Jerry Garcia's involvement in the project, because it was interesting. We dedicated the whole program to talk about Surrealistic Pillow because there's so much there to talk about. But when I was talking to Jorma, there were so many different, comments about that were opposed in some cases.
Were they comments by people that
like
were
Rick
there?
Girard, the producer?
Well, there's
okay,
one, yeah.
And his comment was that he never saw Garcia around and didn't think he produced that much. Where Jorma had to say that Jerry was there and he was a big influence.
Well, he was I would say that he was definitely an influence. We asked Jerry to come down and be a part of the recording process. The first album, Jefferson Airplane Takes Off, was pretty much like in those days when a band had a certain amount of material, you went in and you recorded pretty much your live set practically, and that's how it was with that album. And the second album, when Grace joined us, after Signe was on the first album, that album we had an actual 2 weeks in the studio, and the producer was Rick Girard, and that was the first time we used a 4-track a recorder, which allowed you to do overdubs and vocal overdubs, which was really something that was taken advantage of by the Beatles, of course, and by us, because Paul loved the 3-part vocal harmonies, and with that way you could do background vocals and do that without losing generations off the original track. And so that was a big step forward in the recording process. And also, from my point of view, to answer your question, when Jerry came in, he functioned as our guy against them, so to speak, because you did these things at the bequest of RCA, and they would hire a producer for the record. And a lot of times that producer wanted to have a hand on how the record sounded, and often did, and particularly in those mid-60s recordings up to that. And so Rick had his idea of the sound and what would make a good record. And a lot of times, at that point, we were bringing a lot of what we were developing out in person on stage and trying to get some of that into the studio rather than have a pristine, articulate dry sound in the studio. And a lot of bands went for that, but we wanted to get a little more of the dirt involved with the band. So as we tried to wangle some of that influence in there, Jerry joined us for a few days in the studio, where we felt we had somebody that understood our music that could go into the control booth and be an ear that we would trust. because we didn't know Rick Gerard, and it was all the LA scene, and we were the San Francisco scene. But the LA scene, of course, put out terrific records all that time. You know, I follow Carol Kay, you know, and she's got information about all that recording that those studio musicians did. It's just fascinating. But we weren't part of that world, of course. We were part of the live world and part of the band world. And what was new that was happening then were bands were equal members from our point of view. We came in there, everybody had a say in how they played. Nobody dictated what parts they were going to play. Everybody fashioned their own music. And with that, of course, it was an untried and true formula that the LA recording scene, so to speak, was not used to. And so when Jerry came in, he helped us out with some little pieces of the arrangements of the song. He played on, I think it was Today.
Yes.
Yeah, he did that lead guitar line with a nice melodic lick in it, a call and answer to Marty on that. As a matter of fact, I was playing some guitar on that overdub the bass. So we did a lot of different things in the studio, which I really enjoyed because I like that studio environment where I could really sit down and work on material. And some of the material that I really enjoyed working with, every songwriter, Paul, Marty, Grace, and Jorma, they all had different approaches. And I, as a bass player, and starting to work later on with sustained notes to add almost like string parts to different songs. It was an opportunity for me to use a lot of my knowledge that I learned through in the jazz world and before I came out of California, we'll get to that, where I could really sit down and map out bass parts that would orchestrate the songs and lift them up. So for me, that was a great environment for me to really sit down and finally, as we work on the arrangement of the material, you know, could really fashion a bass part around it, would really hold it together. And I remember talking to Rick Gerard, and he was great, and talking about, you know, how to do things here back and forth. You know, we were all so young and so inexperienced in the recording world that, you know, a lot of stuff went by like mad.
I wanted to ask you about that. When you're saying you're crafting your bass work to the songs and stuff, is this something that you would work on individually, or did you kind of get feedback with the songwriters as you were doing it?
But we rehearsed as a band, so you know, you sometimes the songs were in bits and pieces, and you put them together, and that was part of what was happening at Surrealistic Pillow. Marty had some songs written, Paul had some songs written, Grace, and although Grace had done the two songs that were White Rabbit and Somebody to Love with her other band, Great Society, we approached them in a completely that would show our personalities. So there's a lot more aggression into the songs from the personalities within the band. At the same time, Marty with his ballads, they worked out really well today and coming back to me in the studio because Rick Gerard could use those echo chambers that are sitting above us and create that sound in there that made the notes float and feel like we walked into an environment on the record. And I think that was another beginning of the sonic sound of a whole album at a time. Mm-hmm. You put it on, and because they were all recorded at the same time, in there's a fluid sonic landscape of the album.
There certainly is.
You know, that represented that period of time. That the next album that we did, Baxter's, thank you, was completely different, and right. We went in another direction entirely. But I think that was what made that album's such a representative slice of time in that particular time. Because so in answer to your question about how I would approach the songs, it was all different. You know, sometimes I sometimes I'd sit at the piano with Grace, and just she and I next to her, and she'd work on the songs. She mostly played piano, and as her songs developed through other albums, I'd sit there and work out and hear the notes, and she'd be patient enough to let me sit there and work out a bass part that would have melody in it, that would have movement all up and down, and I'd decide on the different sections of the song where how I would approach them. And so that's how I approached Paul's songs too. His song writing was a lot different and developed into a lot of anthem kind of, We Can Be Together and Volunteers later on, and so I developed my bass sound to do a little more roaring in there, a little more sustained with a versatone amplifier on a separate track cranked up, and as I found that out, I was able to add another layer of sonic bass work into the songs. They didn't work for every song, but the songs that I thought they would work at, that's where I jumped on.
The Pillow record is just such a great record because every single track is so strong on that record. And I talked to Jorma about this too. The flow of the record, like you were talking about, is also just impeccable.
But that just happens. Believe me, it's not worked out ahead of time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Did you guys sit and decide no order of songs were decided by you guys?
Those orders. Of course, orders of songs were worked out and all of that. But and that's what helps with the flow. But once it's that way, it's like you hear it that way, and so it is in cement. And so, we've all had our favorite albums where the order of the songs is very important. Now, earlier in the 50s, everything was singles, and they took those singles and they put them on an album, and so that's how it was. You identified that way. This was the beginning of the era where the order of the album, of the songs on the album, was really important because you hear it that way forever afterwards.
Mm-hmm. They call that AOR, album-oriented rock.
But the order, you would just hear that. Yep. You know what you want to come next. And when they got re-released in bits and pieces, it took the best of it and all of that, you didn't have that album experience. Because we used to put the album on and we lived with that album.
Yep.
The early albums I listened to, Yes Indeed, Ray Charles, What I Say, the Bobby Blue Bland records I listened to in the late 50s, early 60s, all of that. That album order was something you lived with, and jazz records and Julie London records and things like that I listened to, or Jimmy Jufrey records, any of the jazz. You lived with that album for a long time. You just played it, and the order was really very important.
That's what made it so strong, really. Well, let's talk about the White Rabbit, and of course, Somebody Loved. Just propelled the band at that point with the two singles on that record, indeed. And all of a sudden you guys really jumped gigantically. Jack, your bass line in White Rabbit has been done over in movies all the time, everything else there. Is there any insight you can give on developing that, how you decided to start that song? Because as you say, it is different from The Great Society.
Well, I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I was very fortunate because it's a crossroads. It has always been a jazz mecca since the 20s, and 30s, and 40s. And Duke Ellington, all those cats came through there. So I listened to a lot of jazz through there. But also, of course, it's Washington, D.C., so you have the Library of Congress for research. You have all the concert halls and all the classical music. And I listened to a lot of live classical music during the early 60s. The cultural exchange program that Jacqueline Kennedy set up with Russia, where we had Van Cliburn would go over to Russia, and Sviatoslav Richter would come over here, and we'd hear all this exchange. The Bolshoi Ballet came in. And the reason I mentioned the Bolshoi Ballet, the Kirov Ballet, the folk ballet, is that I'd go to those ballets and listen to the orchestra, Prokofiev and Rimsky-Korsakov, and listen to the wonderful sonic variety of a symphony in front of you, and how that would work with movement and ballet and folk ballet, and so that influenced me. So of course, when White Rabbit came in with a halftone, jump up, and you're hearing bolero right away, Ravel, and bolero, it starts off just with the snare doing that for a long time as it creeps in. Only I just transferred that sort of thing over into a triplet-like lead-in, half step up, back and forth on the bass. And so you were asking how things are arranged, so as we started working on the song and said, okay, let's begin, I started with playing on the bass, and that's the way it was from there. Now, nobody
Brilliant. It worked out really great.
Yeah, but but it just seemed like, somebody's got to take the lead. I took the lead there.
Yeah.
Other songs, other people take the lead there.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that I even thought about. Just, let's begin the song. So I'm like, boom, 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 boom.
And it worked.
And it worked. Yeah.
Just like on the same record where Spencer starts the song with the drum part.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And just very, very cool.
Yeah. And so I remember you were asking before how that happens, and it happens just because Spencer started playing, and we said, that's cool.
Yep.
It wasn't any great
right
decision making when nobody holding their head or something.
And Jorma
we didn't have a fight over it,
Jorma said the same thing. He said a lot of this stuff organically came together.
Well,
and this worked.
Yeah.
And I said, did you tell Spencer to start with the drum thing? Because he said no. He just did it, and we loved it.
Now, believe me, there's plenty of leader sideman bands out there. That's the world I came from. So if you want to digress a second to your earlier question, when off camera John asked me about what I did before I came out to California to join the band. The band was I think put together in August of 1965, and I joined in October of 1965 before we got the record contract. But in any case, I played a lot of club work starting very young, at age 14. Actually, Jorma and I had a band together in high school. He was a senior, I was in another school, junior. I was in 7th grade, he was in 12th grade. And, I was 14, he was 17. And so we had a band where we did a lot of cover work. And then I was playing guitar. I had my 58 Telly. I wish I had that guitar.
Oh, I
today.
bet you do.
But anyway. And but after that story, which we're going to right now, Jorma being a few 3 years and 4 months old, left and started college and moved on and moved out to the West Coast. Those 3 or 4 years, I worked in the local scene and up and down the East Coast, from Wildwood, New Jersey, up to New York and back down, in bands that were oriented basically in the past. We played, almost every band had 2 saxes and a horn. We're talking blue plaid tuxedos, stripes down the side. And you played a lot of the music that I played in the clubs was so-called grown-up music. So by the time I was 15 and 16, I was working in these clubs and playing guitar in some bands and playing bass in another. I started playing bass in 1960. And a great story about how I started playing bass, if you'd like to hear.
I would.
Okay.
Yeah,
There's a gentleman named Danny Gatton in New York, in Washington, D.C., and the great unknown guitar player. He's just a whiz. He's a year younger than me. And at that time, he was famous then. He'd at 12 and 11, he'd won banjo and fiddle contests, and we're talking D.C. is really the South, because it's mostly Virginia, Maryland, Virginia, and then North Carolina down. So a lot of there's a lot of Appalachian music comes up through D.C. into up through the Appalachians into D.C. So he was just one of those guys that could play Billy Butler's that really smooth picking technique, of like honky tonk and things like that. Or there's leads he could just do it.
Oh,
At age 15, he could do it. He was just great. In any case, one summer he had a gig. I think it was the summer I turned 16, 1960. He had a gig for the summertime. And I think it was at the Dixie Pig where Charlie Daniels got his start. Here's another guy. And his bass player had gotten ill that summer, Ernie. And he said, listen, Jack, do you know of any bass players? Now, in 1960, very few bass players played electric bass. Almost all the bands, Ray Charles, all that kind of stuff, they're all stand-up bass players, And the electric bass had just really started to come into use. And it was used in a lot of country bands. And the country circuits and things like that, it was easy to figure out. And at first, electric bass, looked like a Telecaster bass, only then that was the precision bass before they got the second one that sculpted back. And so he looked around, and I was playing guitar, and he said, listen, it pays good money. It's $115 a week, Of course, we're talking 5 sets a night, 40 on, 20 off. 2 shows on Sunday afternoon show and a Sunday night show, 6 nights a week. $115 went a long way in 1960, but gas was 19 cents a gallon. So it's just like the Chuck Berry song, Dollar Gas, it really could take you somewhere then. So anyway, and so he said, listen, I've been Ernie's bass here, why don't you do the gig? I said, sure, I'll do the gig. I said, but I don't know how to play. See, and of course the classic line, how hard can it be? It's only got 4 strings. So anyway, I did the gig, and after 2 weeks, I just fell in love sonically with the instrument, and I thought, I'm going to get myself a bass. And that year, Fender had come out with their Fender Jazz Bass, 1960. Concentric pots, 2 pickups, volume, tone. So you could mix all these sounds. And I figured I'm going to go for that because my hand's not really big, and the precision bass, the neck's a little too big for me. And that was Ernie's bass. And so I ordered the jazz bass, and I paid for it with my regular business, which was a lawn cutting business that I had at the time in the neighborhood. And I served 400 papers, the Evening Star, the Washington Post and the Evening Star.
Boy.
Of what the Evening Star is no longer, of course, afternoon papers. So on Sunday morning with my rig, which was the wagon with steel wheels on it that the neighbors really loved, as I'd go down, Davenport Terrace, screeching at 3 in the morning and serving papers. Out of those 2, I paid, I think, it was $280 or something for a Fender Jazz Bass that had just come out a couple of months before. And that started me off on the instrument. And then exponentially, my work quota really went up. And that's how I continued on for that. So when I came out to California, and Jorma and I kept in touch, I used to see Jorma I'd take the train up to New York, and we'd go to Gertie's Folk City and see Reverend Gary Davis and Sonny Terry, Brad McGee, and all those guys in the early 60s, which was the first early folk revival, with Dick Spotswood and all those guys in Washington labeled the Rediscovering John Hurt and Son House and all of that, And which is really funny because when you think about it right now, like I'm 16 years old, and maybe those guys were in their 40s or something, and they were playing in their 30s. It's like those were old cats.
All these old guys.
And there's old guys. Now 45 years old or something like that. But anyway, when I came out to California, Jorma had never heard me play bass guitar. And so I remember picking me up at San Francisco Airport when I decided to come out and try out for the Jefferson Airplane bass spot, because Jorma picked me up there, but he says, you better be able to play. I said, I can do it.
And you did. And you did. All right. Well, thanks for all that, Jack. Let's move on to another question I want to talk to you about here. We spent 2 episodes talking about the Reno Road record.
Yeah.
Jorma put
Speaking
out,
of that period of time.
Yeah, exactly. And 1960. And,
right.
we talked about his record, and what was so incredible to me is listening to that record. Is 22, 23 tracks on it. 17 of the songs are still things that Jorma will do solo, or
absolutely.
you guys, Hot
Yeah.
Tuna,
Yeah.
still does to this day. So the project was so beautiful. The fact that you had these tapes and they sounded so great. I mean, of course, I know our man Ricky went and did what the magic.
Well, he
and
didn't.
stuff,
Really, I mean, he said to me, "These sound great."
They're just
Well,
right.
how'd you record it? Set up the microphone, play it.
Well, yes, go ahead and talk about that if you would,
Right,
Jack.
well-
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Well, back in that period of time when Jorma and I played together in high school, on that, my father, a dentist, Dr. William Robert Casady of Reno Road, the dentist office was part of the house in those days, and doctors and dentists, they had single men,
Right.
practices. His brother, my uncle, Warren Casady, was 4 blocks up the road, and he was the doctor, and my father was the dentist. But he was in the late 20s. He really wanted to get into electronics and radio work, and of course his mother said, "Hey, doctor, dentist, boy," So he sort of his hobby was electronics and building things. His father, that I'm named after, John Casady, did all the Fox theaters. He did all the relief work and interior decoration, all the Fox theaters. So. And I've carried some of that down. I fiddle around, do stuff with my hands, a lot of stuff. So he built the famous 50s rec room, the recreation room. It was done in basements in the East Coast. And they were always knotty pine like this, and you had a null-and red sofas, couches, and backlit scenes, of photographs, and a bar down there. And my dad built through using Heathkit amplifiers, which was a home build-it-yourself hi-fi stuff. He built components, and he bought his English Garrard changer, and he was an avid collector. He belonged to the American Jazz Society, which sent out, which was a new format, a collection of individual jazz recordings on LP records, long playing records, running at 33. And the kids had their web cord, which was in a little drawer and all of that he built, and he built all this wonderfully crafted stuff with a big Jensen speaker in the end of the wall with a gigantic 20-watt Heathkit amplifier. And Jorma and I listened to all of our stuff, all of our record collection, all that kind of stuff, from rockabilly to blues and all that kind of stuff. And so, as a matter of fact, my first guitar amplifier was an 8-watt Heathkit amplifier that we built together on the dining room table after dinner every night, and put it together with a speaker and all that kind of stuff, So, but also, I bought, I think in 1957 or 58, a Wallensack tape recorder, which was a new deal. You could, and you go reel to reel, but then you could play stereo, and which is a brand new thing. So it would play stereo by another speaker, being a satellite speaker being off the side if you wish. If you didn't wish to run stereo, it's really interesting. It was really 4-track with 2 tracks of stereo going in one direction and 2 going the other. So you could flip the tape over, and that's how narrow the magnets were on it. But in any case, I was familiar with the recording and whatnot from early on. So when Jorma left to go to Antioch College, where he met up, and you heard about his story of meeting Ian Buchanan and changing from strumming the guitar to using a finger-picking technique where you play, there you'd have the bass notes on there, plus rhythm plus 2 fingers to play the melody and note combinations and intervals and things, and he got into that style of playing. So when he left, 4.5, 5 months later, he came back as a finger-picking guitarist and singer of songs in the genre of somewhat of Reverend Gary Davis and Blind Blake and things like that. That was records that we had heard a lot of. And so what was fascinating is he came down and he said, "Let me show you what I've been working on." So he played some stuff. I said, "Great," so the recorder's right there. Put on a fresh tape. Shamrock, I believe, was the tape. The budget tape for the amount of money rather than Scotch.
Right.
In any case, it held up.
Oh,
it worked.
It did.
And I recorded a bunch of stuff. And then, of course, he moved on, I moved on, our lives moved on, in different ways until we met back up 5 years later in San Francisco. But we kept in touch with each other. Later on, I think in the year or the year following, he did a work furlough program in New York where he would spend 3 months in New York, working at a convalescence hospital. He told you about that. And I'd take the train up, and then we'd go and hear a bunch of different players, within the genre. Now, I didn't have any chance to play that music with him too much then. A little bit here or there, but not much at all. Really, we got into it when I came out to San Francisco, and we were working with the Jefferson Airplane, but when we weren't playing in that field, we were sitting around. Don't forget, we weren't working a lot. And so therefore, there's a lot of time where I had to work on your craft. That's what you do. But as far as musicians go, we weren't young at that. I was the youngest at 21 when the Jefferson Airplane started.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know we have to wrap this up because you got to get ready for the big show. Tonight, we're kind of doing an impromptu thing where I'm going to ask you the first question, and then we're going to go to Vanessa, who has gotten some great questions from the audience as they were coming in tonight. So this is a question for both Jorma and Jack, as they'll have different viewpoints on this. But my question is, the solid part of the Jefferson Airplane right here on stage here. When you both were playing back in the day, the Jefferson Airplane, you had 3 great vocalists, songwriters, and front people for the band. And my question to you, Jorma, and then of course we'll hand it to Jack, is what was your approach to playing with 3 different vocalists, and with the way they put their songs together, how would you plan to accompany the music?
It's a really simple answer, John, and the answer is, with 3 really loud vocalists, my approach was to try to bury them under the lead guitar as much as I could. No, we had 3 great songwriters, and I got to play cool stuff with them. But I'm sure Jack, how would you answer this question?
Well, I enjoyed my time with the Jefferson Airplane. For me, as a bass player, I got to approach all the different songwriters really quite differently. Marty Ballin loved a good ballad, and he loved a good romantic song, and he liked a good kind of a steady rhythm behind his playing, kind of bump, bump, bump. Of course, I took a complete 180 approach to that, but still, his songs, for a little time we shared an apartment together, and it was really interesting watching him create a song and pull it together. And then by the time I got in the studio, I had a lot of fun crafting how I was going to approach his song. But Paul Kantner, on the other hand, came from a whole different sonic background.
You could say that.
But also, he had a big 12-string guitar, and he liked anthems, and he liked vocal harmonies. He was really responsible for the 3-part harmony approach to Jefferson Airplane that none of the other bands had at that time. And that's really, I think he was responsible for making that kind of sound. But when he got into, a couple of years into the band, he got into his anthems, We Can Be Together and Volunteers and things like that. That was really his. He loved to raise his guitar above his head, and march through the crowd. And that kind of thing, I could really be bombastic on the bass and really roar those lines across with a versatone amplifier and make it really sustained. And then Grace was, I think, the most trained approach to songwriting. She really crafted the songs very carefully. She had a really interesting classical background. And when she wrote the songs, she and I would just sit down at the piano or work out the sections. And I had a lot of fun with her songs because they were really unusual, and they were, I think, musically the most challenging for me.
Excellent,
Well said,
excellent
well said.
answers. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Jorma. Well, before we get on with the music, Vanessa, a question. Susan.
Oh, Susan. So Susan asked, this is for both of you, how big is your record collection? And 2 parts, and what's the holy grail record you wish you had but never got?
Ooh.
That's a deep question.
That's a deep question. Well, my collection's not as big as it used to be because I realized that I didn't have stuff to adequately store all these things. So much of my record collection can now be found at Vanessa's River of Time shop.
And you too can own
But-
one if you drop by.
But it's all online these days anyway. No, but I've kept some vinyl, all those original Reverend Gary Davis pressings and a lot of early blues stuff, etc. Now I know you haven't thrown anything away since you were 10 years old. So what?
Yeah, my first record that I bought was Crazy Audio at the piano.
Oh, Crazy Auto! I remember
Auto at
Crazy
the
Auto.
piano. I think I was about 10 years old or something like
Yeah,
that.
Bill Haley, Rock Round the Clock was my first one.
Exactly.
78.
Well, we had that on 78, actually. But when I came out to California, soon after my father passed away and my mom moved out of the house, Reno Road, which, by the way,
Ooh, Reno Road.
Reno Road, there's a record that just came out called Reno Road
What a
by my friend
coincidence.
over here. In any case, my mom sent all my records out. I had a really huge jazz collection with just everybody in it. And my father was a jazz collector as well, so I got a lot of his stuff. And I didn't have room for it. We were staying in people's houses and couches and things. Things didn't start out the way they ended up. And I gave my about 2,500 records to San Quentin for the inmates because I knew there was a lot of jazz guys, and jazz fans in there. Probably some jazz guys too. But I managed to keep about another 2,000, which I still have. So I
Good
still
Lord.
have. I still have the Yes Indeed album by Ray Charles. I have some choice jazz albums that I've kept, but mostly I've lost a couple of albums along the way. My O.V. Wright, Nickel and a Nail, on Backbeat Records, is now because I lent it to a guitar player that used to play with us a long time ago, and I never got it back. And so that's probably the one of the albums I'd love to get back again. But otherwise, I've kept most of them.
Jack, I think I saw that record in Vanessa's collection at the store.
Well, on the back it'll say Jack Casady, 4727 Reno Road Northwest, Washington 8 DC.
I'll check. If it's there, I'll pull it.
Another question,
And
Vanessa?
this is our final question. We're going to let them play, and then the second set, we have 2 more questions from the audience. But I will be in the lobby during the intermission, so you can always come up to me, and if your question blows away one of the other questions I already have in my pocket, maybe I'll ask it. Okay, Jorma, this is for you.
Uh-oh.
What's the most fun thing you've ever done non-musical?
Whoa.
I know.
This is
I
This
know.
is
I
loaded.
think I know.
This is a loaded question. This is a really trick question. This is a lose-lose situation for me.
And don't forget, your wife is here.
Next question.
I guess
I think you should. I know what you should answer. Don't we all know what our husbands should answer?
Thank you, Vanessa.
No.
It's simple,
that?
fairly simple. A lovely motorcycle ride through Southeast Ohio.
Yes. Where, Scott? Did I tell you? I told you. That is the ultimate for Jorma. And if you read Jorma's book, Been So Long, there's more about Jorma's life on two wheels than anything
You know,
else. So
I have to
good.
say something here. Hey, be quiet. When Jorma answered or did not answer that earlier question about playing on Paul's and Grace's songs and all that, let me say this. When we were in the studio, I never saw anybody work so hard on his linear guitar playing to add to those songs. And he came up with the most creative lines. The lines he does in White Rabbit, the rhythm playing in Somebody Love, all that kind of stuff. He came up with all kinds of really great stuff. And that's the answer to your question. He worked really hard at it.
Question for the podcast. Asked our great guest here tonight, Vanessa.
I decided to do them on my phone. I couldn't read my writing. Okay.
Come on,
This
Vanessa.
is for both of you. You guys are at the top of your game right now. The gentleman that I spoke to, Johnny, not Jew.
No.
He wants to know what album or project are you two most proud of that you did together? Can be with Hot Tuna or Airplane.
Well,
But
for me,
he-
it's real simple. The first Hot Tuna record.
There you go.
What was your answer?
The first Hot Tuna record.
That was going to be my answer. It was.
All right. All right.
And the little background to that, we'd worked on most of those songs in hotel rooms while playing with the Jefferson Airplane. And like the Chelsea Hotel, or the Van Rensselaer or other hotels. And it was just music that we always wanted to play and put together into an album. And finally we got a chance to do it.
And look at you now. Good question, Johnny. Okay. What do you remember about playing in Wichita, Kansas on October 25th, 1970?
Nothing.
Grace was 7 months pregnant.
About as much as I remember of what we had for dinner last night. I mean, these are valid questions, but
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yes.
that's a tough one.
dot.
I mean, it wasn't. I can't remember a thing about it.
I know.
What'd you say your name was?
All right, I'll go to the next question.
There wasn't a tornado or anything that happened, was there?
I don't think so. You play with tons of people. Who excites you musically today?
Well, for me, lots and lots of people. There's so much good music out there. It would be very difficult. But I will tell you somebody who always excites me, and that's Mary Chapin Carpenter. She's my poet laureate.
Yeah, I can't really pin it down to a particular person, but I listen to music all the time, as my wife, Deborah, can attest to. But I think it's, I'm discovering through YouTube and a lot of other channels a lot of music that I missed in the past as well. And so that's kind of how I go out into the world of music, and I listen to music from all around the world, and I discover a variety of things that just keep me inspired. Particularly, I believe in youth, and I'm always astounded at how young and sophisticated the players are today, and it's just inspiring, and I'm glad it's happening.
Well, as you know, we have a 19-year-old daughter.
That was my segue. Yeah, I was
Yes.
just going. Thank you.
Who's also a DJ. So I do.
Who has never played one of her dad's songs ever.
Ever. We do hear some great music from our daughter, and she's turned us onto some fabulous
Right.
artists. Yep.
But you
So-
know, like a lot of my world is what I've been inspired by, and I find more and more as I get older, I'm 81 now, I'm listening to a lot of music of early music from the jazz world in the late 20s and 30s and 40s that really set the stage for the way I play today. And so much stuff has been re-released and put on, and clips from movies of great jazz artists and whatnot, that I'm delving back into that world, and it's fascinating. It's just, the good music that's always been out there.
Hot tuna!
Jack, while we're taking this little sort of an interactive trip down memory lane, the mind is a dangerous place to go in by yourself anyway. And one of the things that popped up while this discussion was going on, Colorado Springs, Jefferson Airplane, the young lady that became Elvira, Mistress of the Night, brought Grace a white rabbit. I remember that. A live white rabbit. Thanks, Elvira. There we go.
Walking down that lonesome road, set my soul on